Well, good evening and good to be with you again on Geelong Newsbeat. I wanted to make a comment this week about, well, a few things sort of which piece together. You may have noticed on television recently, I think it was released just last Thursday, advertising for a film called For Holidays. Interestingly enough, it stars Reese Witherspoon amongst others and Robert Duvall, but interestingly enough it was released in the US only a couple of weeks ago, and it was called Four Christmases. Somehow or other the social engineers have been at it again, and it's probably considered to be offensive to some people to make a film called Four Christmases, so they've turned it over to Four Holidays. Well, we're a bit behind the times. I was in the States about 3 years ago, and the racks of Christmas carol music were headed by a sign saying holiday music. In fact, 3 years later, the States have turned around and said, this is a lot of nonsense. The season is Christmas. Let's put it back to where it was. The season of peace and goodwill, and something that can be shared by people of all denominations and none. For many, many decades in this country, in fact for the 2 and a bit centuries that we've been going, Christmas has been a great time of people celebrating together, irrespective of their personal religious commitment or otherwise. And I'm not quite sure that I certainly have never met a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist that objected to the celebration of Christmas in this country, and you've got to ask yourself who in fact is driving all this. That's the first point I wanted to mention. The second point was, you may have heard stories, and there's even further figures, of an increase of violence amongst little kids at school. There was a story that made a lot of news the other week, at the end of last week, pertinent to 4 little prep students beating up an older kid at the Heidelberg Primary School. And figures since released have indicated that it's not unusual for little prep children, quite a number of them, to be suspended, I think more than nearly 200 of them during the course of this year, for violence in the playground. Which brings on the point of, what are we raising? What are we subjecting children to with violent games, videos and so on? A lot of alarm bells have been raised about this in the last few years, but it's only maybe now that the real effect is coming out. Turn the clock on a bit further forward, of course, and you can't pick up the paper either in Geelong or in Melbourne any weekend without seeing a whole graphic pictorial display of violence on city streets. As they say, alcohol-fueled violence, so it's really not safe to walk anywhere these days after about 8 or 9 o'clock on a Friday, Saturday or even a Sunday night. So what are we turning into? We're moving away from our Christian traditions, we're moving away from the season of peace and goodwill, and we're turning ourselves into people who are a threat to one another. To add to the mix in terms of where we're heading, I was given a call just last week by a reporter from the Geelong Advertiser to tell me that 2 local clubs are trying to get permission to play football on Good Friday afternoon. What do you think of that? He asked me. Well, I didn't have a great deal of time to think about it, but I didn't need a great deal of time either. And I said, well, I'm not sure why they would be doing it, and I certainly would not support it in any way whatsoever. Apart from anything else, we've only got a couple of days during the course of the year where we have a recognition of a time of family, a time of quiet, a time of being with one another in this action-filled life that we live, which leaves a lot of people with depression and a lot of people stressed out in any number of different ways. But as well as that, and I suppose I speak with a certain degree of bias as a Catholic priest, as a Christian minister, the fabric of this country has been built, and the traditions that we celebrate on Anzac Day and so on, the spirit of mateship, all of those things have a lot of tradition within the context of the Christian background and Christian laws which have framed our society and framed our nation. That doesn't mean we're unwelcoming to other people. Of course we are. We're probably one of the best nations in the world for that. But that's part of that has been that background that has been there of treating other people the way we would like to be treated ourselves. We turn our back on that and on its specific observances with a great deal of danger if we choose to do so. And playing footy on a Good Friday afternoon might not seem to some to be a big deal, but in fact, of course, even the AFL itself has chosen very specifically not to go down that path. I was present at the Geelong Footy Club a couple of years ago when AFL Chief Executive Officer Andrew Demetrio said very clearly that he did not favour football on Good Friday, and they would not be going down that path, and that hasn't happened to that degree, so he's remained very faithful to it. But even then, when the AFL were thinking of it, they were thinking of having it as a twilight game after maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, not in the middle of Good Friday afternoon, when many Christian churches are having a Good Friday observance for the very reason that we have the holiday in the first place. The reality is that I would certainly urge the clubs that are considering this to have a rethink about it, to have those that give the stop or go to have a good think about it. I believe it would become far more divisive within the clubs and within the Geelong community than perhaps might at first be thought. It's not necessarily that everybody goes to church, but there is a sense of sacredness, of recognition, of the need for quiet time that the Good Friday does provide us with. It's valued, we throw it away at our peril. And as we see our society becoming more violent, more angry, more dependent upon alcohol and more secular, well, I'm not quite sure that it's that good a place to be as it used to be. That's certainly something what I think about. You might like to have a discussion amongst yourselves. Good to be with you on Geelong Newsbeat.